I think when we're really curious about things, I think that's probably the quality that helps you find your purpose. If you're really curious about things and always open to what's going on in your world, what messages are you getting? What road are you being led down? How does it feel? Like you get messages as to when you are on the path that you're supposed to be on or you're not.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Filled with stories of inspiration, Loving Our Life's Work podcast shares examples of courage, perseverance, and triumph. Our guests are examples of people who are actively living their life's purpose, and they've come to share the vision of their life's work with us so that we can learn to give ourselves permission to live ours. If after watching this podcast, you feel like you've gained some inspiration from this podcast today, or we've added value to your life in some way, please subscribe and follow us for more content, comment, hit the thumbs up on this podcast, and share it with someone you know who would benefit from hearing this amazing story. I'm Adam Devaney. I'm a clinical social worker and founder and CEO of the Life's Work Positivity brand. Today, we have with us Kathy Imabayashi. Kathy is an author, early years specialist, and a parent of boys coach. 45 years working with children and toddlers, from toddlers to teens, and also has her own boy. She has experiences in Canada, Japan, Lebanon, Thailand, Georgia, and Qatar, which really, I feel, gives you a very well-rounded approach to how to interact with, how parents interact with their young boys. Thank you, Kathy, for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So you have an inspiration to help parents with their young boys. And tell me a little bit about how this came about for you. What was the pivotal moment where you recognized and felt like this was part of your purpose in your life's work?
Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, like I gave birth to our son later in life. I was what they called a mature mom. And so I was almost 40 by that time, and I had been working since my 20s, working with young children. And I felt I was quite knowledgeable about children in general and knew that I had a affinity towards the little boys that I was working with. I clicked with them. I also thought I was very, excuse me, clear on not being biased about gender, almost going in the opposite direction of neutrality at one point, especially in the early 80s. What happened when I had a son, I grew up in a family of girls except for one boy. So I was very clear on what it meant to be female and my own experiences as a female. So when this little bundle came out, I loved it because it was okay, it's a clean slate. I don't know what I'm doing, and this is going to be fun. But I've got this background with me, so I thought, how hard can it be? It's going to be a blast. And as he was growing up, some things changed a little bit. But the pivotal point was when he was about 3, and my husband was working on a Saturday, and this little guy wanted to go fishing, which meant, the plastic fishing rod and the cassette player with Raffi singing. And that was our idea. And so I took him down. There was a little creek a little bit off the roads in Japan. And so Japan is very safe. I didn't have any concerns whatsoever. It was a little bit off the road. There was a path coming down that had trees going over it. It was really a beautiful little spot. we'd been there for a little while and having a lovely time together. And when I looked up the path, I saw what I categorized in my mind as a gang of 4 or 5 young boys coming down. And that moment, I felt total and complete fear. And it was like, oh my God, there's a gang coming down. It's possible, probable, that I'm going to have to find a way to protect my son and myself. And that was instinctive. There was no logic to that thinking whatsoever. Anyway, the boys finally made their way down the path. They were in that summer transitioning between grade 6 and grade 7, going into middle school. So big body spurts, growth spurts. And at that time, actually, I was teaching 4, 5, 6. So I should have recognized things a little bit sooner, and I didn't. The boys came down. They were lovely. They were, they're big-bodied boys with still very pure, beautiful hearts inside. So we had a lovely afternoon together, and that could have been the end of it. And had it been, I don't know how my future would have played out, but I'm very analytical and I think things to death. And so we went back home. That night I was sitting there and I couldn't let it go. There was something really, really bothering me about my reaction to these young boys coming down. It's like, why was that it? The first thing I felt was fear. And then I had the thought, my little guy is 3. So in 10 years from now, or 15 years, or 20 years, is some other woman going to feel total fear when she has an interaction with my son? He's on the other side of the street. He's passing her. Is it going to be total fear? Simply because he's a male. That's the only thing to go on. He's male, and so I'm fearful. And when I thought of someone feeling that way about my own son, who was the sweetest, purest, kindest little boy, it was like, okay, something is wrong with this picture. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I'm going to find out. And that started it. And so I guess I'm getting close to 30 years of trying to learn everything I could and then, share what I'm learning with others and putting it into practice myself. So that was the pivotal point.
When we look at finding our life's purpose, and I know we spoke earlier about how there can be many of them over the course of our life. There are those magical moments. Now, sometimes those moments are traumatic. You thought that was going to be a traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And so there were those emotions attached to that as well. And then sometimes we have those pure moments where we really touch the magic, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And we enter into that realm of meaning that really catapults us into the next level of understanding. Yeah. Much like the experience that you had down by the river.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like people can benefit greatly from hearing stories like this because a lot of people lack the inspiration or even permission to follow those impulses. Mm-hmm. Right? And to take some of the traumatic experiences that they have in life or negative experiences that they have in life, and then really actually channel that into something else.
I think when we're really curious about things, I think that's probably the quality that helps you find your purpose. If you're really curious about things and always open to what's going on in your world, what messages are you getting? What road are you being led down? How does it feel? Like you get messages as to when you are on the path that you're supposed to be on or you're not. Or I think you do.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I had an experience many years ago when I was first actively looking for my purpose in life. And it was actually brought about by both a strong intention on my part, an openness on my part, and a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on my door.
Mhm.
And my question to these three groups of Jehovah Witness young men who came to my house was, if someone's looking for their purpose in your church, and they're in your church, they're looking for their purpose, what is it that you tell them? And the first two groups of young men didn't have an answer for that, but they promised that they were going to find someone who did.
Mhm.
And I just kept inviting them back. I loved my time with them. It was a great time. And on the this went on for about 3 weeks. And the third group came and they had an elder with them. And I posed that same question. Someone comes to you in your church and they're trying to find their life's purpose. What do you tell them? And he looked at me and he was like, well, that's easy. He said, it'll be like the grass growing or the wind blowing. And I was like, yeah. Every time that I've ever done anything that I knew was was not drifted off that center path, I knew that. That was the feeling. That was the feeling. And I had tried many different things, right?
I really believe that when you are open to what's happening in your world, um, you find that path. When so you talk about pivotal points in your life as well. I had gone from the East Coast of Canada to the West Coast, and after university, and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I went into teaching as a backup. I thought I was going to be a social worker and couldn't afford the fees for 5 years. And so I went into teaching as a backup until I found what was it, what was, that would, kind of thrill my soul. And I I got to the point where I didn't know what I wanted. I was content, but things weren't, there was more. I knew there was more. I knew I had more. And I also felt like I was starting to go down a path that wasn't going to end up very well. And but I couldn't seem to pull myself out of that. And I read a book, and the book was James Clavell and Shogun. And at that particular point in time, I had no interest or understanding in Asian countries. My interest had always been Africa. I read this book, and it wasn't the book itself, although I loved his writing. It wasn't the book itself, but there was something that was so strong. It was this pull, it's like, you got to go to Japan. And I've never had that experience before. And it was just, it was so strong. So within 3 months, I, closed up my own home and um, moved to Japan, to a country I didn't know anybody, didn't know anything about. I did get a job before I went, but making that decision to listen to that voice, something was, it was destined. If, that was going to get me on the path that I needed to be on to be able to fulfill this mission of whatever my life's purpose is. And that started everything. So I think when you're on the right path, things seem to happen. As long as you keep, opening doors, knocking on doors, shining your light, doing the work, things happen that, help make your life full and rich. But you have to be able to listen to that voice that says, oh, this doesn't feel quite right. And then try something else. The times that have been the most challenging for me in my life is when I have not listened to that voice. And if I don't listen, something happens, and then I'm giving another opportunity to learn the same lesson. If I learn it, I move on. If I don't, I'm given another opportunity to try again. So I think there's a lot to listening, even if it doesn't fit in with the norm of what people expect you to be doing. If you can really tap into your own inner wisdom, I think you start finding what that thing is that you're most passionate about.
And as I said earlier, it can come from really positive experiences and come from really what we would consider negative experiences. But at the same time, there's meaning that we attach to all of that. And it's that curiosity that you were talking about. It's that never-ending search. And part of that comes from a desire to learn. There's really no substitute for that in life. And when we are constantly wanting to learn and expand, that openness creates the opening that and holds that open. And especially when you're starting out in business. If you're starting out in your own business, there's seasons to everything. And there's what I heard called the other day so accurately, the lonely season. This is the season when you know this is what you want to do, and you're working at it, and you're going along, and you're growing. That's, I think, the key. That's where the learning and the growth and the self-development comes in. And you're growing so much that you almost can't hang out with who you were hanging out with.
Yeah.
But you know you're still growing, and you're not quite grown up to that level where you're hanging out with the people you really want to be hanging out with yet. And you're doing all this work, and you're not maybe even, and here's the key, I think, in business from that vantage point, not really necessarily making enough money to have other people doing things for you. And you're doing everything, right? And it's kind of a lonely time. But that's when you learn about yourself.
Yes.
When you go and you try to do something that you've never done.
So this, yeah, I can certainly relate to that, because these 3 years have been maybe one of the biggest learning curves since starting to get into the world of boys. This idea of being an entrepreneur at my retirement age, and having to learn so much about technology. It's like, I don't know anything about business. I had never been a social media person. It like everything. It was there. It's been nonstop. The learning process behind everything, and it would have been much easier to take an easier route. Like, but there was always this drive that I believe I can make a difference in the lives of little boys and in the lives of their parents and the caregivers around them. So if I need at my age and stage to be learning something brand new, I'll be darned if I'm not going to learn it. I love a challenge and love to learn, but this was pretty darn intense. And I do everything myself. Everything, absolutely everything.
Learning all the different apps.
I've learned a lot about that. I'm the only thing that I haven't done. My son gifted me a book designer for this book that I thought was going to be out 2 months ago, until I realized all the things I didn't know about formatting. Now I understand why people pay people to format. Like, it was huge. But it's also a sense of pride. It's like, because I know it's for something that is so important to me, I can kind of suck it up, and I'll figure it out. there's so much information at our fingertips now. I just keep reading. I listen to YouTubes. Just, you can do almost anything. I think if you're clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if it's something that is going to make the world a little bit better when you leave it than when you came in, then I think the world helps you to accomplish that.
That's so true. It's been said that people who know how will always work for people who know why.
Yeah.
If you were to give me your pitch on what your why is that drives this, because you got a book coming out, you've got a coaching practice, like you've got a lot going on, as you said, in your retirement years. Okay, most people would be kicking back.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your share your why with our audience?
Um, I would be labeled today as a highly sensitive person, which means growing up not often feeling really understood or just feeling different and often feeling, you know, because of being different, not being good enough. So there's something in that emotional pain that I think makes, like, brings out the mama bear stuff, in that I see a similar pain in young boys, and unnecessary. If we just understood a little bit better and implemented some of the respectful strategies, understanding about gender differences. So that's it. It's the emotional part of it. I don't think our little boys need to be suffering as much as a lot of them are. And then they turn out to be the teens and the young adults and the young men, and they continue to suffer and be misunderstood. Doesn't need to be that way.
So what I hear coming out from you right now is a form of compassion.
Mhm.
The highly sensitive person will typically empathically pick up a lot from other people.
Mhm.
And when highly sensitive people, I count myself in that, pick up on the suffering of others, we are called to do something to rectify that.
Mhm. Yep.
In my own work, right? Working with a lot of addiction clients, I feel for the lost sensation, the lost sets of emotions, the abandonment, the hurt, the worry, the anxiety, the nervousness. Um, but yet at the same time, it provides me the opportunity to see the best in people, to see their future, to see that they are not um, a victim to their past,
Mhm. Yeah.
that they're the wonderful, marvelous creator of their future. And it's really, really gratifying. And I feel like, as a highly sensitive person as well, that I've had to channel that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when meaning happens, it cannot be ignored. I mean, it can be ignored, and it often is, right? But when you pick up on the suffering of others, whatever group that is that you
Mhm.
attach that meaning to, it it creates an emotional response in us.
I think the difficult thing is when you have that sensation, you have that feeling or understanding, and you can see ways to support um, the people who need support. But people are not, it's like treating the disease without understanding the root cause. And people sometimes don't want to go any deeper. So they have a little boy and they're having problems with behavior. So they want to know how to fix the behavior. Well, that's up here. That's the superficial, not superficial. That's the top layer. But for almost every incident of misbehavior, especially in a little guy, there is some deeper emotion that is not being met. And if you can get past the behavior, not accepting it or condoning it, but if you get past that and you can understand or uncover what it is, what is that unmet emotional need, then your response to the misbehavior is going to be much different. But if you don't look deeper than the surface, then you might be fixing the problem temporarily, but that little boy is not going to have his needs, his emotional needs met. And that's where it kind of snowballs.
No, I told you about that backstage. I told you about the experience I had with my son the other day, and he did something that really was a behavior that did require some sort of an apology on his part, and he was given that opportunity by my wife and would not take that opportunity. He's still very sensitive, and I think he gets embarrassed a lot when he misbehaves, and so he kind of will double down. And he was doing that, and my wife was very clear with him and said, "Hey, this is how it's going to work. You're gonna apologize for this. You need to apologize for this, and you can spend some time in your room if you need to. But when you come out of your room, you're still gonna need to apologize." Well, my wife was out doing chores at that point when he finally just came out of his room, and I could tell he didn't want to. I asked him. I said, "Are you ready to apologize?" And he said he just kind of gave every indication that he had no interest in doing that. And so I came out of the kitchen because I was doing dishes. I came out of the kitchen and he was doing the little back away thing that kids will do when they're kind of being a little obstinate about something. And my kid excels at that one. He's got that one down. He's a master at it. And so instead of escalating anything, because really I don't want to add some negativity on top of what happened, right? That's not my goal. I got down on my knee and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, there's three things that you're, gonna that, if when you become a big boy that you'll just need to be good at because big boys do these things. And he's at 6, he's very interested in becoming a big boy. And I said, the first one is saying I'm sorry when you need to. And I said, Daddy said sorry 3 different times already today to people. He's like, really? Like 3 different times already. Because I got good at it, because it's what big boys do. And I said, the other is learning when to say thank you. It's a really great one. And I said, and the third one is learning to say, I love you, which I said, you have in spades, my boy, because he is a very sweet boy. Mm-hmm. And he just had this look on his face like, yeah, I can learn those things. I can behave that way. And then later in the evening, I was quizzing him on it because he's a real smart kid and he doesn't miss anything. So I was quizzing him on it. And I said, why don't you tell Mama the 3 things that you learned today that big boys say? And he got all of them and added please. And it was just one of those moments where I really needed to just be on his level and see where he was coming from because he was embarrassed. And that's not easy.
There's a few things like I didn't want to interrupt you when you were going. It's really hard for me to not interrupt you. There is a fair bit of research that explains the difference between how males and females react to shame. We all
Yeah.
feel shame, and it can be, a debilitating emotion. But for little boys, there's nothing, I don't know if it's just little, but I know for boys, there's nothing worse. It's like that is the worst emotion they can feel. And often, with our actions and our language, um, we can unknowingly embarrass them or shame them. And um, it can have really, really strong negative impacts. So that's one thing. Anytime that shame is part of a situation, it makes it very difficult for a boy to be able to come back and be logical about whatever the conversation is needing to be. The what you had said about at the end of it, to me, that's all about connection. So especially when we feel the need to discipline, which is a whole other topic, when we can increase or at least maintain our connection to our children, then we have the possibility of being able to guide them better. And in my opinion, discipline is about guiding. It's not about punishing. So the more that we can connect, because okay, I don't know what happened to your son at that point, but from what you said, he's 6 years old. So I'm assuming he goes to school. And I'm assuming this was after coming home from school.
Yes.
So whatever it was that happened, you have a little 6-year-old who has come in from a day at school. And school is not like it was, 30 years ago, even 20 years ago. And especially in the early years, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, those years are challenging for our little boys because the educational system is much friendlier to a female type of learning. The little girls love to sit and write their letters. They go home from school and they play school. It is challenging for our little boys who developmentally, they're usually a year to 2 years behind developmentally. The little girls at the same age that they're starting school, which is why there's recommendations to start them at least a year later. But they're in school all day long. They are having to try to contain and control their emotions and their bodies, and they need more physical activity. They need to be like the leaders, the heroes. They want to, they want to be doing projects and building things and running outside and slaying the dragon. And, they've got all this really beautiful stuff going on that doesn't match the expectation of what's going to happen in school today in general. So a little 6-year-old comes home from 6 hours or however long where he has had to control his emotions, try to focus on whatever the teacher's expectations are, learn to be socially with another group of children and all that entails. And then he comes home at the end, and who knows if he's, had any situation during the day where he felt shamed or embarrassed because he was called out for not doing this or pushing that kid or whatever. So he comes home and he's in his safe place. This is his world. But he's got all this stuff built up in him. And, and then he comes home and something happens and something triggers something. And it just kind of, volcanoes out into some kind of misbehavior. And that's kind of what I meant about the misbehavior, just being a signal. And the signal is something's wrong. Like whatever it is, there is something there. When we can look, okay, so if I was, if that was my, and it's happened more than, more than maybe I'd like to share, but there were times that that happened to us as well. So once I started understanding more about this, now I would say to a parent, when a child, first of all, if they've had some kind of an really explosive misbehavior, like big emotions, then there's something called time silence, a concept of time silence. And that's the period of time that that little guy needs before he can have a constructive conversation or whatever. So if there's been some kind of a real blowout, then there needs, I'm not saying, you need a timeout, but it might be something like, we can't talk right now because the emotions are too high. Why don't you go take a shower? Or why don't you go in there and have something to eat? Looking at the physical things, if you can, try to make sure that the physical reasons are not impacting the situation. Once there's been that time for him to be able to kind of begin to self-regulate, that's the opportunity to come in and see if he can talk to you. And that's again where that curious, like the real curiosity comes in. And if, and it's kind of how you ask as well. And if you come into it and say, I was really upset when this happened, and I'm not quite understanding it, but I would like to, because I'm quite upset about it. And you looked very upset when this was happening. If he can start to talk to you, and then after he says whatever he's saying, I'm sure you know all these techniques as well, but to be able to say it back to him. This is what I think, this is what I'm understanding. Is this it? Is it clear? And however many times you need to go back and forth to do that. So it's kind of like this movie. And he's telling you, this is the movie. And you're confirming that you're on the same, screen following this story. Often you will get to the crunch of things. Not always, but often. So you get that part of it out of the way. And then, you say to him, well, I understand it better. I understand, why you were so upset, but the behavior is not acceptable. So can you think of, like, brainstorm with him and this happened today. This was not okay. What can you do so that in the future the same problem doesn't happen? When there's the same triggers, the same situation, it's not going to happen. What are some things that you could do? And, help him if he's just learning how to brainstorm. And, maybe it's, when he feels, there's so many things out right now. When he feels, that emotion getting higher up, he knows to, do some breathing, or he knows to take a break and go out in the yard for a little bit. And whatever he chooses, then, you say, okay, that sounds like a great idea. So you're trying to set him up for success the whole time. And then when that part's finished, when it's clear and he's feeling more empowered the whole time, you're kind of on the same team. There was a problem that happened. You're figuring it out. He's taking responsibility for it. And that's all great. But there's still one more step. And so then you got to say, okay, but even though you've got all these great intentions and you've got a good plan in place, and I feel like you're going to be successful, what happens if in the heat of the moment you lose control again and the same behavior happens? What consequences? And usually they're a lot tougher than, I remember doing that once with my son. He said, I won't have breakfast for 8 days. Like, thinking of his own, I was like, well, I think that's a little harsh. But, if they're part of the process, they're part of the problem, they're part of the solution. And it's not about punishment. It's about guiding them. They're they're still little guys trying to figure out the world. And especially those early years of education, they are dealing with a lot. So that's kind of my take on that situation.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. My son definitely suffers from the gender differences
Mhm.
in school. He's in
Yeah.
in first grade. He's in a class with both boys and girls, and first grade and kindergartners.
Okay.
And a couple of weeks ago, we got a call from his teacher saying that he was stubbornly refusing to do his work. So I followed up with the teacher when I dropped him off the following day. I said, "What was going on?" And she pointed over to a dry erase board where she had written two sentences, and all she wanted my son to do was copy those sentences and write them down. Okay, now to him that was a nothing, right? Like
Me too.
it was literally just a nothing. But like you said, there's a gender difference there, right? That the girls and some of the girls in the class might have actually been excited to do that.
Well, and maybe he would have been excited if he could, if there was some reason behind it, but if he could have built that sentence, whether with Play-Doh or with, popsicle sticks or something that matched his interest.
Mhm. And there wasn't. And so that followed a conversation probably a week before that where he was like, Daddy, I really like when we get on the computer at school and we do things there. And I really like this one other area, but he's like, all the rest of it is so boring.
You ask any boy, and I would like I don't know how high the percentage, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 95% of all boys, which is a bold statement. If you ask them what their favorite times of school are, PE and recess. Like every single time. PE and recess. What else was good?
Yeah, exactly. You know, part of my brand of life's work, it is it is a funnel towards an end. And that end of all of my work is to be able to financially support the creation of a new school initiative.
Oh,
I call it the Pod School Initiative.
mhm,
The Pod School is specifically designed for kids who are already homeschooled.
okay.
It's just a part of a day, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth in the morning, ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th equivalent in the evening or the afternoon.
Mhm.
Uh, really only 3 or 4 hours. I haven't decided if it's going to be 3 or 4. It's probably going to be 3, right? With at least one full hour being physical.
Yeah.
And then we take the learning funnel, the retention funnel, and we focus entirely on the largest retention. Okay. It's one thing to read it and listen to a lecture on it,
Mhm.
right? It's another thing to see somebody do it. You're going to retain more of that. It's to do it yourself. You're going to retain more of that, right? To do it in a group, you're going to retain more than that. To do it competitively, you're going to retain even more. And so when you look, you mentioned the changes in school, public school, in the last few decades
Yeah.
has been dramatic. So when you talk about the learning funnel and the retention area of, like competitive group work, right? Being the highest retention, highest learning rates, you're getting the most change in learning in the child with the least amount of work.
Yeah.
Um, that kind of flies in the face of participation awards.
Well, you know what I have found over the the years, both from personal experience as a parent, and then through, the classroom, those times that you tap into what your child is really passionate about. So like for ours, when he was a little guy, baseball, he lived and breathed baseball. Like it was, he knew all the stats, he knew this, he's just really into it. And so taking that at that particular time, he was just learning to read, and taking that interest and providing him opportunities, like in an environment, to expand on what the curricular standards were, but doing it connected with baseball. Well, he just, like, his reading went incredible because he wanted to understand in order to play this baseball game that had to do with math and reading. So it's kind of like it's like we don't do anything as adults, or we don't like to do anything that doesn't have meaning. Even things we don't want to do, if we understand the meaning behind it, then we can go ahead and do it. But it's those things that just resonate. It's like, I want to learn more about that. And when we can create that environment, like, the learning is off the roof. And it's just so respectful. It's not like saying, I think because I'm older and wiser, you need to be writing those two sentences down because for whatever reason, who knows?
Yeah, whatever reason didn't resonate with my son.
Well, and but he's probably right. But people don't say that. They don't stop and think, okay, could that 6-year-old have, is there a message there that I am missing? Is there something for me to learn as the adult in the room? That's where I think sometimes we miss the shot.
Yes, that's it exactly. I needed that conversation to remind that conversation I had with my son, reminding him about sorry, I'm sorry, thank you, I love you. Okay. As the adult in that moment,
Yeah,
that lesson was just as valuable a reminder for me.
yeah, exactly.
And so, when we talk about people's life's work, when we talk about purpose, when we talk about meaning, it has to be something that resonates with us on an authentic level.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't, it's just another thing to do. It's just another task, right? And there's a lot of people in the world who go about their everyday lives doing nothing but these sort of mundane just tasks. There's
Yeah,
there's no heart in it.
yeah.
And but even someone who's lived their whole life like that can find something that drives that meaning up, and it fundamentally changes them. I recall an experience you had with a mom of 4 boys
Yeah.
that you shared with me. And I would really like, because I feel like that pushed the meaning value up really high for you. So I'd really appreciate if you would share that with us.
Well, that was in the beginning, like close to 3 years ago, probably by now, when I was starting up the business. And so one of the things that I read I had to do was get really involved with social media, which was new to me. And so I joined a few different parenting groups to try to understand, currently what are the needs that young parents are facing. And I happened to be in one of these Facebook groups, and there was a thread going that I joined, and this woman said she was really struggling. She had 4 little boys. She had reached her limit. She was currently in the bathroom having a good cry because that was the only, place she could go for some privacy for a minute or two, and she was just in pain. And there, I again, trusting my instincts. There was just something there. And so I messaged her directly at that same moment that she's in the bathroom. And I said, I don't do this. There's no scam here. I just read your post. My heart's breaking for you. I'm a parent of boys coach. If you want to, grab the phone, we can have a talk and maybe I can help you get out of the bathroom. And luckily, she did. And so we probably talked for 15 or 20 minutes. Luckily, her husband was in the home. So yeah, the children were supervised. But all she needed was someone to say, you're doing a good job, Mom. It's hard. You're raising 4 boys. It's not, you can't parent without understanding a little bit more about the inner world of those little boys. And that started a beautiful relationship that we've had since that time. But it was just, see, I think those things come to you if you keep going out there and putting yourself in positions where if if someone needs your help, if it's meant to happen, it'll happen because you are putting yourself in a position to be approached or for it to happen. But that was just a really lovely experience of trusting your instincts and just trying to help, using the knowledge you have, using the skill set that you have to help someone just a little further down the road that you can say, been there, it's rough. This is what I learned. Try this and see if it helps you.
That's incredible. And you never forget those moments.
No, no.
And I think the key to what you're saying is just going ahead and putting yourself out there
Yep. Don't hesitate.
and trusting your instinct, because that still small voice, in my experience, has been right every time. I've ignored it many times.
Yeah,
We're free. That's our free will, right?
exactly.
But it's right every time. And we don't get anywhere in the world, especially as people who are called to do anything, without putting ourselves out there and without taking a risk. It's risk in everything that we do.
Yeah.
And nobody ever got to the end of their life and thought to themselves, boy, I wish I'd played it safer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think too, something that helps, it always helps me in the classroom too. And so it transfers over really well to my current position. But it's the idea that, even if there's, 20 kids in the classroom and if even just one child, if I can make their world better because of what I understand, then, you know, all the days in the classroom that were not so easy, it's worth it. Just that one person. So if in these 3 years, if it was just that one mom who's not part of my business, if I helped her, then everything is worth it. It's like it doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be that, my book is a, top seller or that I've got dozens of people, taking my courses. That would be nice, but that's not it. If it's even just one person, one child whose life is better, I'm doing my job.
And I'm glad you're doing it. And keep doing it. And I look forward to joining your community. You've got everybody can I'll post all of I'll post links to your work and your website down below. So if you have young boys, definitely go and take a look at what's there. You have a community, a monthly subscription for a community that you offer. I think that is a great idea. And then there's the higher level coaching that that you offer, and I think it's fantastic. And what's the title of your book?
Raising boys who become remarkable men.
Oh, What a great title.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Kathy, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today. I know that it was
Pleasure.
really early in the morning in Japan.
No, I appreciate you agreeing to flip the timing because I'm not good in the evening, whereas in the morning I can get pretty excited about what I'm talking about.
I would say that about my when I meet with my counseling clients too. I always say the first two
You get the best.
they get the real challenging at them, you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Again, I just really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today and sharing all of that with everyone.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for having me here and making it so easy to talk with you. Thank you.
oh, it's my pleasure. Okay, well, thanks for listening to the show today. You can learn more about our guest by following the link tree below in the description. And as always, I want to remind you to search your heart, do the important inner work, and give yourself permission to find your purpose and live your life's work. Thank you again for listening today. And thank you, Kathy.